Starting with chapter 5, I need to remind you with chapter 4 that we dealt with yesterday. If you remember, at the end of the chapter, Stephen Blackpool was summoned by Bitzer in order to visit Bounderby for something to be discussed that was going to be explored and revealed in chapter 5. I remind you of the content of chapter 4. We had an idea about the workers' unions and the problems of these unions, which did not do its role and did not take its responsibility in defending the workers and let's say defending their rights. So that was one of the points that Dickens attacked in Hard Times. In chapter 5, of course, you know, the previous chapter was entitled Men and Brothers. The workers were supposed to be brothers who care for each other, who help each other and defend each other. And now in chapter 5 we have men and masters. Men is supposed to be the community, the common people, the workers, and the masters are those people who control those workers, يعني factory owners, capitalists. I summarized 5 points that we can discuss in chapter 5. As you see, I covered the first one, the title, Men and Masters. Who are the men? They are the workers. And who are the masters? They are the capitalists, the people who are in charge of the money, who are in charge of the mills, the factories, and those who need money from these workers. The setting of the chapter is, as you know, now Stephen came from the factory and he is going to Bounderby's house, so it must be the house of Bounderby. And we will go through these 3 points. Stephen's standpoint towards workers, how he considers his fellow workers, the other ones, and what will happen to Stephen after meeting Bounderby, the outcome of this meeting. What's going to happen for him? Is he going to be promoted to be, for example, a union leader? He is going to be in charge of other workers. He's going to be dismissed from his job. This is what we will find out in the next a few pages. And finally, I said the chapter talks about the capitalists, the people with the money, the people with the possession of this kind of property, and the workers. How those capitalists look at the workers. Do they look at them just like men and brothers, as a friends, or they just let's say consider them as let's say people who could provide money, who could provide work for those money owners. So this is what we will learn. The chapter begins with Bounderby meeting Stephen at his house. Well, Stephen said, Bounderby, in this windy manner, what's this I hear? What have these pests of the earth been doing to you? Come in and speak up. Here he is encouraging Stephen to be just like a telltale, a person who tells on his own brothers, let's say, and look how Bounderby describes those workers as pests. Pest يعني آفة, حشرة أو آفة. Of course, the writer describes the setting. Bounderby's house, James Hart house is available. Louisa is sitting, Bounderby is sitting, and Stephen is being interrogated, just like an interrogation room in Bounderby's house. With your pardon, sir, said Stephen, I have naught to say about those workers, anything to be said about them. So if you compare what happens in the previous chapter and what happens now, how those workers considered, looked, and talked about Stephen in the previous chapter, and now how he is talking about them, defending them, and refusing to tell anything about them. So this is a kind of, let's say, a comparison between Stephen and his perspective and those workers and theirs. "Look here, hothouse," said he, Bounderby. "Here is a specimen of them. عينة من هذول العمال. When this man was here once before, عندما جاء ستيفن سابقا, I warned this man against the mischievous strangers who are always about and who ought to be hanged wherever they are found, and I told this man that he was going in the wrong direction. Now, would you believe it that although they have put this mark upon him, he is just a slave to them, still that he is afraid to open his lips about them." As you see here, Bounderby is encouraging Stephen to talk about his workers and to describe the situation and give him some details about what goes on in the factory and how workers behave, what kind of plans they have in mind, because those people, the capitalists, need to be informed and updated about what goes on in their factories, because they are afraid of a mutiny, tamarrud, or any kind of movements that could be arranged by the workers. And we see here how Stephen reacts towards Bounderby's words. "I said as I had now to say, sir, not as I was fearful." أنا قلت إنه أنا ما أريد أقول، مو بسبب I was fearful، السبب ليس خوفا، fearful of opening my lips. It is not a matter of being afraid of opening my lips. You said, I know what you said, more than that I know what you mean. So this kind of skirmish, kind of debate goes on between Bounderby and Stephen. I would rather maybe not come to it, sir, but since you put the question, I am not wanting it to be ill-mannered. I will answer. I have passed a promise. Here, Bounderby asked him why could not he join the unions, and since Bounderby asked and urged Stephen to answer him, I will answer, he said to Stephen. I have passed a promise. Naba, you asked me yesterday about this particular issue. Why did not Stephen join the union and become one of those people? I told you that there are two reasons. The first one is his belief that these unions are useless, are not fruitful anymore. And this is related to his own ideology, his own philosophy. And there is one more reason that urged Stephen to, let's say, not to join these unions. Here he justifies, I have passed a promise. يعني هو سوى وعد إنه هو ما راح ينضم إلى هذه اليونس. But what kind of promise, to whom he promised, or whatever ideas, it is not made clear here. This will be discussed and will be revealed in next pages. Said Stephen Blackwell, protesting against the words that had been used. He tries to defend his fellow workers and disapproves Bounderby's words, addressing himself to Louisa. Now Louisa is sitting, and whenever he speaks, he looks at Louisa and he speaks to Bounderby as if he finds some kind of peace in Louisa's face. After glancing at her face, not rebels, not yet rascals. This is how Bounderby describes the workers. He described them as rebels, مشاغبين, and rascals. They are not rebels according to Stephen, and not rascals. Not the kind, ma'am, not of that kind. They are not done me a kindness, ma'am, as I know and feel. But there is not a dozen men among them, ma'am. A dozen. فقط أكو dozen. 12 شخص ممكن. يعني metaphorical expression, not 6. But what? Believes as he has done his duty by the rest and by himself. God forbid, as I that have known and had not experience of these men all my life, I that have eaten and drinking with them and sitting with them and talking with them and loving them, should fail for to stand by them with the truth, let them have done to me what they may. So look, he is justifying, although he drinks with them, he eats with them, and he lives with them and talk with them, he likes them and he does not want to do them any harm, but he refuses to join them for certain reasons which have been explained earlier. Yani the significance of this is that Stephen is a kind of a person who is who doesn't want to let's say hurt his own people, his own fellow workers. No, ma'am, they are true to one another. See, this is somehow important quotation that describes the way Stephen considers his fellow workers. No, ma'am, no. They are true to one another, those workers, faithful to one another, affectionate to one another, even to death. Be poor among them, be sick among them, grieve among them for any of the many causes that carries grief to the poor man door, and they will be tender with you, gentle, comfortable, Christian with you, be just like Christ. Be sure of that, ma'am. They would be riven to bits. They will be torn to bits. They will be broken to parts before ever they would be different. This explains how those workers are living a harmonious life at the mills, regardless of the dozens of the 6 or 10 people among them who might have different views, but the majority of those people are described in this quotation. They are true to one another, affectionate, faithful, etc. In short, said Bounderby, this is all said by Stephen in order to convince Bounderby that those people are peaceful and they don't want to make any troubles, and Stephen is not going to talk about them or do them any harm. In short, said Bounderby, it's because they are so full of virtues that they have turned you adrift. فيقول له باوندربي بسبب هاي الفضائل مالتهم هم لهالسبب هم طردوك وطلعوك برا اليونيون. How it's man, presumed Stephen, appearing still to find his natural refuge in Louisa's face, that what is best in us folks seems to turn us most to trouble and misfortune and mistake. I don't know. This kind of debate goes on until Stephen is interrogated by Bounderby to speak or to shoot his own complaint حتى ينطي الشكوى مالته, and he is answered by Stephen, I have not come here. Stephen reminded him to complain. أنا ما جيت حتى أشتكي. I come for that I were sent for, لأنه أنتم طلبتوا مني أن آتي. Sir, I were never good at showing of it, though I have had my share in feeling of it. Indeed, we are in a muddle. This quotation is important because this expresses the writer's viewpoints on the tongue of the simplest character with a very simple language. Yani we can hardly understand some of the words. We have difficulty in translating these words into English. So Dickens here says, and he is now the spokesman of the workers of these factories. Indeed, we are in a muddle. The workers are in a muddle. Look around town, so rich as it is, and see the numbers of people as has been brought into being here for to weave. شوف دول الناس اللي جو حتى ينسجون, and to card and to piece out a living. All the same one way somehow, twixt their cradles and their graves. من المهد إلى اللحد. Look how we live and where we live. How we live we had an idea about how simple is his life, Stephen's life. We had an idea how his house looks like. In what numbers, الأعداد الضخمة مالتهم, and by what chances, and with what sameness, السameness اللي حكينا عنها اللي it evokes monotony. And look how the mills, هاي المصانع, is always going, always operating and working, and how they never works us no nighter to any distant object, and how these mills do not stop for those people to rest, except فقط, exception, always death. فقط عندما يموت الشخص هو يرتاح. Look how you consider of us and write of us and talk of us, and goes up with your deputations to secretaries of state about us. شلون تسوون reporting to your seniors, to the authorities about the workers, and how you are always right and how we are always wrong, and never had not no reason in us since ever we were born. Look how this have grown and grown, sir, bigger and bigger, broader and broader, harder and harder, from year to year, from generation unto generation. Who can look on it, sir, and fairly tell a man it's not a muddle? So this is the most accurate description so far that expressed the status of these workers. They are described in such a terrible way according to Stephen's words. And then Stephen highlights the idea with a quiet confidence. If you was take 100 now, as you see, Bounderby said we can move Slackbridge and send him away, as we will make an example of half a dozen Slackbridge. We will indict the back guards of fellow for felony and get them shipped off to penal settlements. If that's the case, لو أن المشكلة بسلاكبريدج نقدر نخلصكم منه we send him away. But Stephen said it is not a matter of Slackbridge, the union leader. If you was to take 100 Slackbridge, all as there is, and all the number 10 times toward, and was it sew them up in separate sacks and sink them in the deepest ocean as were made ever dry land come, to be you would leave the muddle just where it is. المشكلة إذن, the muddle is a muddle. It is not a matter of a union leader. The problem is not with the Slackbridge. Mischievous strangers, said Stephen with an anxious smile, when have we not here, I am sure, since ever we can call to mind the mischievous strangers. So the problem is not with the union leader, according to Stephen. إذا نخلي دول الكايندز hundreds of numbers مال Slackbridge ونخليهم بأكياس ونخيطهم and we throw them, sink them in the ocean, the problem will pursue, will go on. The muddle is a muddle. So Dickens tries here to suggest that we need, let's say, original, important, and deep solutions for their problems. It's not a matter of removing a union leader and replacing him with another. So this is how Stephen considers his own trouble with Bounderby. Now it is clear to me, said Bounderby, that you are one of those chaps who have always got a grievance, and you go about sowing it and raising crops. That's the business of your life, my friend. And look here how Bounderby describes Stephen. You are such a waspish, raspish, ill-conditioned chap. You see, said Bounderby. Even your own union, the men who know you best will have nothing to do with you. I never thought those fellows could be right in anything, but I tell you what, I so far go along with them for a novelty that I will have nothing to do with you either. Stephen raised his eyes quickly to his face. So this is a kind of condemnation of Bounderby to Stephen for his, let's say, disagreement, for not accepting to tell on the workers, and for his own viewpoints, because he made it clear for Bounderby. Dickens wants us to understand that, look, this is the person, when people call for their rights, they are being condemned by factory owners, by the capitalists. And we have an example, which is Stephen. This is a live example in front of you, audience and readers. So here Stephen is being denounced and condemned by Bounderby, and Bounderby tells him, you can finish off what you are at, your work, because he is weaving, said Bounderby with a meaning nod, and then go elsewhere. كمل شغلك وارحل إلى مكان ثاني. Sir, you know well, said Stephen, that if I cannot get work with you, I cannot get it elsewhere. إذا ما ألقى شغل هنا أنا بعد ما ألقى شغل anywhere. The reply was, what I know, and what you know, you know. I have no more to say about it. And Stephen then looked at Louisa and left with a note, heaven help us all in this world. And he left the scene. So as you see, the writer shows something in this title. Now he tries to condemn the capitalists, to show them as bad people who care about their own pockets, regardless of what kind of conditions those workers live. And it also he also shows us that the unions and the workers need people to call for their rights. Of course not the union leaders, because they will not do them any good, but we need people just like Stephen to defend those workers and let's say wrench their rights from the factory owners. So the chapter being important in its title, as far as we have now a kind of a battle, kind of a debate or a skirmish between Stephen, who represents the men, and Bounderby, who represents the masters. The setting, as I highlighted, is Bounderby's house, and we went through how Stephen considers or looks at his fellow workers, and his standpoint or viewpoint is shown clearly that he is a good person and he is not going to do any harm for other workers. His future is made clear that he is not going to work with Bounderby anymore. Now he is jobless. He does not have any work, and the capitalist Bounderby and the workers, his viewpoint towards the workers and the way he looks at them is also clarified in this